A struggling farmer finds a strange woman sitting quietly in his wheat field. He doesn't recognize her, but she's known his name since she was 10. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The sun hadn't fully broken over the ridge when Noah Blake stepped out onto the porch, coffee in hand and sleep still dragging behind his eyes. The cold bit through his flannel shirt as he surveyed the land he barely held on to. Frost-kissed fields, weary soil, and a stubborn tractor that groaned louder each morning. Another day, another set of things he couldn't quite fix. He took a slow sip, eyes drifting toward the edge of the wheat field, where the golden stalks met the tree line. That's when he saw her. At first he thought she was part of the landscape, just a shadow or a scarecrow someone forgot to remove. But no. She was real. A woman sitting on the low fence post like she'd grown from the earth itself. No coat, no bag, just long dark hair caught in the wind and a stillness that didn't make sense. Noah set his mug down and stepped off the porch, boots crunching frost-bitten grass. As he neared, he noticed how calm she looked. Not lost, not startled, just like she belonged there. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked, slowing as he reached the fence. She turned to him, her face soft and clear, with eyes that held something quiet and knowing. "Yeah," she said, voice gentle. "I'm fine." He frowned. "You sure? This isn't exactly a public park." "I know," she replied, glancing out over the wheat like it was a painting. "I used to sit here a long time ago." Noah blinked. "Pretty sure I'd remember that." She smiled faintly. "You wouldn't. I was just a kid." He studied her for a moment, the way her hands rested on her lap, the calm in her breath. Everything about her felt oddly familiar and yet completely foreign. "You need a ride? A phone?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, I just wanted to see it again." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Well, if you're planning to stick around, might as well come in for some coffee. It's cold out here." She stood, brushing off her jeans. "I'd like that." As they walked toward the farmhouse, Noah couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just begun, and he didn't even know her name. The screen door creaked open as Noah stepped aside to let her in. She paused on the threshold, taking in the chipped paint, the sagging roofline, and the worn welcome mat that hadn't said welcome in years. Still, she stepped in like she'd been there before. He poured 2 mugs of coffee in silence, the air thick with quiet questions. She sat at the small kitchen table, her fingers curled around the warm ceramic as she looked around, not with judgment, but with something softer, something that made him uneasy. "I'm Claire," she said finally, like the name had been waiting at the back of her throat all morning. Noah nodded. "Noah." "I know," she replied, eyes still on the faded wallpaper. That gave him pause. "You know?" She looked up, meeting his gaze head-on. "Just heard the name before." He didn't push, but something about her answer didn't sit right. Folks didn't come around here just to visit, and they sure didn't sit in wheat fields before breakfast unless they had a reason. "You from around here?" he asked, sipping his coffee. She shook her head. "Used to visit my aunt a long time ago." What was her name? Margaret Hollis. That name hit like a soft echo. He remembered Margaret, a quiet woman who kept to herself on the east side of town, passed away nearly 10 years ago. He vaguely remembered a little girl who used to trail behind her, all long legs and shy glances. "You're her niece?" Claire nodded, eyes drifting to the window. "I used to sit on that fence, watch the fields sway in the wind, watch the boy who worked them like he was dancing with the land." Noah looked down, unsure how to respond. Compliments weren't something he knew what to do with, especially when they came wrapped in memory and mystery. "You said you're just visiting?" he asked. She smiled, but there was sadness in it. "That's what I told myself." Noah didn't press further. He just refilled her cup and sat down across from her. The silence returned, but it felt different now, like the calm before something he didn't yet understand. After breakfast, Claire followed Noah out to the porch, coffee still in hand, her boots crunching over the frost-stiff boards. The early sun had begun to burn through the fog, casting the fields in soft gold. She stepped off the porch without asking, walking toward the fence line like she already knew the way. Noah watched her, uneasy but curious, then followed. She stopped near the old sycamore tree, the one barely clinging to life, its trunk split from a lightning strike years ago. She turned toward the empty patch of land just beyond it. "The barn used to be right there," she said, pointing. Noah paused mid-step. "Yeah, it did." She didn't look at him. Red walls, white trim, tin roof that used to whistle when the wind came in from the east. He narrowed his eyes. "You really remember all that?" Claire finally looked over her shoulder, eyes calm. "I watched you rebuild the door after the storm knocked it clean off. You couldn't have been more than 16. That stopped him cold. She wasn't guessing. She was remembering. He hadn't thought about that day in years. His father yelling, the rain pouring, him alone with soaked wood and bent nails, determined not to let the barn fall apart like everything else had started to. "You watched me?" Claire nodded. "Every summer I visited Aunt Margaret. I'd wake up early and sit on the back steps. I used to pretend I was reading, but really, I watched this farm come alive." Noah felt something twist in his chest, some strange mixture of discomfort and something gentler. It was unnerving, being known like that, especially by someone who felt like a stranger, but talked like she'd lived inside his memories. "And Dusty," she said suddenly. "That was your dog, right? Golden retriever with the torn ear?" Noah blinked. "You even remember the dog?" "He used to chase butterflies and bark at the train that passed by." He rubbed the back of his neck. "That was a long time ago." Claire smiled. "Not long enough to forget." Noah looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time he didn't see a stranger. He saw a thread stretching backward through time, quiet and unseen, until now. By late morning the frost had melted into dew, and the quiet hum of the farm returned. Birds in the hedgerows, the groan of wind through old rafters, and the occasional cough of Noah's tractor in the distance. Claire had lingered longer than most guests would have, her coat now slung over the porch railing, coffee refilled once without asking. But eventually the moment came. She stepped down from the porch, walked toward the edge of the drive where her rental truck sat parked under the shadow of the elm. Noah followed, out of habit more than intent. She climbed into the driver's seat, turned the key, and nothing. She tried again. The engine sputtered, then gave up with a heavy cough. She muttered, brows furrowing as she tried a third time. Still dead. Noah shifted beside the hood, arms crossed. "That thing giving you trouble?" Claire gave him a sheepish smile. "Apparently, yes." He stepped forward before he could talk himself out of it. "Pop the hood." Claire pulled the lever, and he lifted the hood with a practiced motion. A thin plume of heat escaped, and he leaned in, scanning hoses and wires like he was reading a language only he understood. "Looks like the ignition coil's loose," he murmured. "These rental places never maintain their fleet." She stood beside him, watching quietly as he worked. He pulled a wrench from his back pocket, he always carried one, even when he didn't plan to, and tightened a couple bolts. "You really don't have to," she said softly. "I know," he replied, not looking up. Claire said nothing after that, just watched as he brushed dust from the battery housing and double-checked the connections. A few minutes later he wiped his hands on his jeans and nodded toward the cab. "Try it now." She slid into the seat and turned the key. The engine kicked on with a clean hum. Claire looked at him through the windshield, something unreadable behind her eyes. Gratitude, maybe, or something older. He gave her a short nod and turned back toward the house, but she called out gently, "Noah?" He paused. "You always help people who wander into your fields?" He turned his head just enough to let a smile creep in. "Only the strange ones who remember my dog." The engine still rattled as it cooled, so Noah figured it wouldn't hurt to offer her a little time and maybe a bit more warmth. "It'll need to rest a bit before you take it too far," he said, glancing toward the truck as the exhaust thinned into the air. "Come inside if you want. Coffee's still hot." Claire hesitated just a moment, then nodded. "I'd like that." The ride back up the short dirt lane was quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. His old pickup creaked with every bump, dashboard lights flickering like they couldn't make up their minds. Claire didn't seem to mind. She rode with one hand resting on her knee, gaze out the window, like she was watching memories instead of scenery. When he pulled into the drive, the house stood before them like it always had, tired but upright, its wood siding faded to the color of ash. The porch sagged on the left corner, and the shutters hung slightly crooked, as if too proud to fall, but too stubborn to straighten. Most days, Noah didn't even notice it anymore. Today, he noticed everything. Claire stepped out and walked up the porch slowly. Her hand brushed the railing like she was testing it, like her fingers were reacquainting themselves with a place long gone. He unlocked the screen door with a familiar jiggle, holding it open for her. She paused at the threshold. "It's just like I remember," she whispered. Noah turned, surprised. "You've been inside?" She gave a soft smile. "Once. Aunt Margaret brought me over when I was 12. Your mom was baking cornbread. I sat on that couch for 5 minutes while they talked, and I felt like I didn't belong. But it was warm. Not just the house. Everything." Noah looked around, suddenly seeing the cracks in the paint, the sag in the floorboards, the threadbare couch that leaned a little to one side. It wasn't much, but hearing her say that, it made it feel like something more. He poured 2 mugs again, setting hers on the table. She sat without hesitation this time, like the house had opened a door from the past and invited her back in. The coffee steamed gently between them as the silence settled back in. Not awkward, not strained, just the kind of quiet that exists when two people don't feel the need to fill space with sound. Claire's eyes moved slowly around the room, taking in the framed quilt square above the window, the worn boots tucked neatly by the door, the small shelf of books with cracked spines and faded titles. Then her gaze landed on the photo. It hung just left of the fireplace, half-shadowed beneath a crooked beam. A simple wooden frame, nothing fancy, but the image inside was vivid in its own quiet way. A boy, young, maybe 17, stood beside an older man with weathered hands and a half-smile. The boy, who was clearly Noah, was covered in dirt, shirt stained with sweat and soil, his grin wide and unapologetically proud. The older man had a hand resting on his shoulder. Claire stood slowly, leaving her coffee untouched, and walked toward it like someone approaching something fragile. Her fingers hovered just inches from the frame. "That's your dad," she said softly. Noah glanced over, then nodded. "Yeah, taken after we finished the north field. I'd never plowed the whole thing on my own before. He stood beside me for the photo, but that day, that was mine." Claire didn't say anything for a while. Her eyes stayed locked on the photo like it was something sacred, like it held more weight than paper ever should. "I remember him," she said eventually. "He used to walk with you down the gravel path in the evenings. I used to see you both from my aunt's window. You didn't talk much, but you always walked in step." Noah leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely. He was a man of few words, taught me how to work, taught me when to listen, didn't always know how to say much else. Claire finally looked away from the photo and turned toward him. "You look just like him when you stand like that." He didn't know what to say to that. Compliments weren't his language, so he just nodded once and looked down at his boots. Claire returned to her seat slowly, as if she'd stepped through time and wasn't quite sure she was ready to come back. The sky had softened into a pale gray by the time they climbed back into Noah's truck. He needed to pick up a few things from town: feed, gas, maybe a new spark plug for the stubborn old tiller. And Claire, to his quiet surprise, asked if she could ride along. Said she wouldn't mind seeing the place again. He didn't argue. Truth was, he didn't really want to drive alone. The road into town hadn't changed much. Same cracks in the pavement, same leaning mailboxes, same half-forgotten billboards advertising corn mazes from autumns long gone. But Claire sat straighter in her seat now, her eyes darting from one old building to the next, like she was flipping through pages of a worn-out photo album only she could see. As they rolled past the diner, she tilted her head. "That used to be Judy's, didn't it?" Noah gave a small nod. "Still is. Judy just stopped putting her name on everything." Claire smiled faintly. "I remember the strawberry pie. Aunt Margaret used to take me there after church, said it was the only good thing about Sunday mornings." They passed the barber shop next, its window dusty, the paint on the sign curling like old paper. Claire's eyes lingered. "Used to be busier," Noah said, noticing her stare. "Whole town did, back when folks still thought staying put meant something." Claire said nothing, but her fingers tightened in her lap. Noah pulled up in front of the feed store where the wooden planks creaked beneath every step, and the bell above the door jingled with tired enthusiasm. Inside, the clerk behind the counter gave a nod, but outside eyes followed them. Two men leaning against a pickup watched Claire a second too long. A woman paused mid-step, whispering something to her friend as they turned. Claire noticed. She didn't react. "You all right?" Noah asked, setting the sack of feed in the truck bed. She nodded, eyes still on the sidewalk. "They don't recognize me, not really, just a feeling." "Is that a good thing?" "I think it's the only way I could have come back." On the drive home, she didn't speak much, just kept looking out the window at all the places time had faded, but never fully erased. They were halfway back from town when Noah turned off the main road and took the long way home, the gravel path that curved along the edge of the wheat fields. The sky had turned golden again, stretching wide and soft, casting the crops in warm light like something out of a memory. Claire rolled her window down, letting the breeze in, her hair pulled back loosely, strands dancing across her cheek. She didn't speak at first, just watched the fields like they were telling her something. Then, almost absently, she said, "I used to sit across that fence, right where it bends near the creek." Noah slowed the truck slightly, his eyes flicking over to her. "You mean the old pasture corner?" Claire nodded. "Every summer. Aunt Margaret thought I slept in late, but I'd wake up at 5 just to sit out there. I'd bring a book, pretend to read. But really, I watched you." He blinked, unsure if he'd heard her right. "Me?" "You were out there before the sun was," she said softly, "dragging buckets, fixing fences, driving the tractor like it weighed nothing. You looked like you belonged to the land. I'd never seen anyone work like that." He cleared his throat, suddenly hyper-aware of the calluses on his hands, the dirt beneath his nails. That was just farm life. "To you, maybe," she said. "To me, it was something steady, something honest. My world was all chauffeurs and glass windows and people pretending to care, but you looked like you meant it, like everything you touched mattered." Noah didn't know what to do with those words. He focused on the road ahead, the way the wheat brushed the edge of the gravel like waves kissing a shoreline. "I used to make up stories about you," she said after a pause, a small laugh in her voice. "I imagined you were some kind of hero, silent, strong, maybe hiding a secret." He chuckled under his breath. "If only you knew. I was just trying not to break the fence or get yelled at." Claire smiled. "I liked that about you, even back then. You didn't have to be loud to be seen." The truck rolled on, quiet again, but now something hung between them, something remembered, something real. And for the first time, Noah wondered if someone had been watching his life all along, not as a stranger, but as someone who already knew the ending she was hoping for. By the time they reached the farmhouse, the sun was dipping low, stretching long shadows across the fields like fingers trying to hold on to the last light of the day. Noah parked the truck beside the barn, its tin roof catching the orange glow. Claire didn't move to get out right away, so neither did he. The engine ticked as it cooled, filling the silence with a kind of mechanical heartbeat. "Looks peaceful now," Claire said, nodding toward the wheat, swaying in the evening breeze. Noah stared out through the windshield. It wasn't always. She turned toward him, sensing something in his tone. "There was a storm," he said slowly. "2 years ago, late summer, right before harvest." Claire listened without interrupting, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Forecast said light rain, but by nightfall the sky had turned black as tar. Wind tore through the fields like it was angry, ripped half the crop out by the roots. Hail flattened the rest. I stood on the porch, helpless, just watching months of work get shredded in 15 minutes. He exhaled hard through his nose, jaw tight. "Insurance didn't cover it all. Bank gave me a short leash. I burned through what little savings I had just trying to prep for the next season, but it never really bounced back after that. The soil was tired. So was I." Claire's voice was soft. "Why didn't you walk away?" He glanced at her. "Because this land was my father's, and his father's before him. Because I've got Maddie watching me every day, learning what it means to stay. You don't walk off a field just because the weather breaks you." She looked at him like he was speaking poetry instead of pain. He rubbed his palms together, calloused skin rasping. "Funny thing is, that storm took half my farm, but it gave me something else. Clarity. I stopped thinking life owed me good seasons." Claire's eyes shimmered faintly in the fading light. "And now?" He looked back out at the horizon where the wheat still danced. "Now I just plant and pray and keep showing up." She didn't say a word. She just sat beside him as the first star blinked into the sky, and somehow that silence felt like the deepest kind of understanding. The next morning came with a hush, one of those soft sunrises where everything feels suspended, sky painted in slow pastels, the air still holding on to night's chill. Noah had already been up for an hour, feeding the hens and checking the oil in the tractor. When he walked past Claire's rental truck, he gave it a glance, half expecting to see smoke again. But it sat quietly in the drive, like it hadn't caused a bit of trouble. Claire stepped out onto the porch just as he wiped his hands on a rag. She had that same calm about her, like she wasn't in a hurry to leave, but also didn't expect to stay. She wore the same coat from yesterday, zipped up now, hair tied back in a simple braid. He offered a nod. She returned it with a small smile. "I called the tow company," she said, like it was nothing, "to square the bill." Noah paused mid-wipe. "Tow company? For what?" "Just wanted to make sure they were covered. They showed up yesterday, after all." He frowned. "I was going to take care of that." Claire tilted her head. "It was my truck." "Yeah, but—" "I insisted," she said gently, her voice leaving no room for argument. "And besides, they were surprised anyone even called back." Noah didn't say anything at first, just looked down at the rag in his hands, now more grease than cloth. It wasn't about the money. It was something else, something older. A wound that pride doesn't like to admit still stings. "You didn't have to do that," he muttered. "I know. Would have handled it. I know that too." He let out a slow breath and tossed the rag into the bucket. "Next time, at least give me a chance to help." Claire stepped closer, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of cedar and something floral. "You've helped more than you know, Noah," she said softly. He didn't reply, just gave a small nod and looked out at the horizon. Pride didn't like being surprised, but even he had to admit, some surprises came with grace. It was just past noon when Claire found him near the shed, shoulders hunched beneath the weight of a stubborn shovel and a wheelbarrow full of cracked fence posts. The sun was high, casting sharp lines across the field, and Noah looked like he'd been out there for hours, sweat beading along his brow, shirt damp, focus narrowed to the rhythm of work. She didn't interrupt at first, just stood at the edge of the field, watching him dig and patch like the future depended on that fence staying upright. Maybe it did. When he finally noticed her, he wiped his forehead with the back of his arm and offered a half smile. "Didn't expect you out here. You lose another truck?" She grinned. "Not today." He leaned on the shovel, waiting. Claire stepped forward, brushing dirt from the edge of a low post. "I've been thinking," she said, "about this land, about what it could be." Noah narrowed his eyes. "What it is tired. But it's still standing," she said. "Oh, still alive, just like you." He straightened slowly, the humor gone from his face. "Claire." She didn't flinch. "Let me help." "You already did." "Not like that." She pulled something from her coat pocket, a folded paper worn at the creases. "I talked to a few people. I want to invest in this farm, not as a gift, as a partner." Noah didn't take the paper, didn't even look at it. He just stared at her like she'd just offered to buy his name. "I don't need saving," he said, voice low. "I'm not trying to save you. I'm trying to build something, with someone who knows what it means to stay." Noah's jaw tightened. "You can't just walk in here with pretty words and a checkbook and act like that makes it okay." "I'm not." "Feels like it." Claire held his gaze, steady and unshaken. "Then tell me what would feel right." He didn't answer, just turned back toward the fence, hands tight around the shovel. She stood there a minute longer, then slowly folded the paper again and slipped it back into her pocket. Sometimes the ground needs more time before it can take seed. She knew that. But it still hurt to walk away without planting anything. The porch light flickered to life just as the last bit of sun sank behind the fields, leaving behind a sky painted in soft blues and tired golds. Noah hadn't planned on making dinner for anyone but Maddie, but when Claire wandered into the kitchen asking if she could help, something inside him shrugged and said, "Why not?" Now the three of them were gathered around the small table on the porch, mismatched chairs, a chipped bowl of mashed potatoes, and a plate of sweet corn that still steamed. Claire sat barefoot, peeling sweet potatoes with the kind of ease that didn't match her polished exterior. She'd rolled her sleeves up, tied her hair back, and looked more like someone who'd always lived on a farm than someone who once lived in a penthouse. Maddie, sitting cross-legged beside her, watched intently. "You're good at that," she said, wide-eyed. Claire smiled. "My aunt used to make me peel a whole basket before I was allowed to go play." "She sounds strict," Maddie said. "She was," Claire replied, laughing softly. "But she loved me in her own way." Noah listened from the grill, flipping chicken slowly. He wasn't used to this sound, laughter, ease, voices blending over supper. Most nights it was just him and Maddie, filling the quiet with talk about school or the weather or the latest tractor that broke. They ate with the porch creaking under their chairs, the night warm and slow. Maddie told a story about a frog she found near the pond and how she tried to keep it in her lunchbox for a day. Claire laughed so hard she snorted, and Maddie burst into giggles. Noah couldn't stop watching them, Claire peeling another sweet potato like she belonged there, Maddie smiling more than she had in weeks, and him standing in the doorway with a plate in his hands and a feeling he hadn't let in for a long time. After dinner, Maddie leaned her head on Claire's shoulder without thinking. Claire didn't flinch, just reached up and gently smoothed the girl's hair. It didn't feel like a guest on the porch. It didn't feel like a billionaire slumming it for a story. It felt like family, or the start of one. The house had gone still for the night. Maddie had long since fallen asleep, her favorite blanket pulled to her chin and a book resting open on her chest. The air outside had cooled, carrying the scent of cut hay and wood smoke. Noah stood on the porch, arms crossed, eyes tracing the edge of the field where moonlight shimmered on the wheat like silver waves. Claire joined him quietly, her footsteps soft. She wore one of his old flannel shirts over her dress, sleeves rolled and hanging loose. She didn't speak, just stood beside him, close enough to feel her presence, but not crowd it. After a minute, she said, "Can we walk?" He nodded, grabbing a flashlight, but never turning it on. The moon was full enough to light the way. They moved along the fence line slowly, boots crunching over gravel and dew-slick grass. The wind played softly with the wheat, and the stars blinked above them like curious eyes. Claire ran her fingers along the top rail of the fence, her touch light, thoughtful. "I used to imagine this place as a world all its own," she murmured. "Safe. Still. Like nothing bad could happen here." Noah glanced over at her, the moon casting shadows across her face. "And the city?" She shook her head. "Big, loud, lonely, in a strange way. You can be surrounded by people and still feel invisible." She paused, voice quieter. "I never felt invisible here. Even as a kid, sitting by that fence, watching the way you moved through your day, it felt like someone knew how to belong somewhere." He looked ahead, the path familiar underfoot. "I didn't feel like I belonged to anything back then, just going through the motions, trying not to fall behind." Claire smiled softly. "Maybe that's why I watched. Because even when you didn't know who you were still trying, still grounded." They stopped near the old oak tree, its branches reaching over the fence like arms stretching for comfort. For a while, neither of them said anything. Then Claire whispered, "This place, it was always home to me. I just didn't know I could come back." Noah didn't answer right away. He just rested one hand gently on the fence and said, "Maybe it was waiting for you." It was the kind of morning that didn't warn you. Bright, blue-skied, the scent of cut grass drifting on the breeze. Noah was halfway through stacking firewood by the barn when he saw the silver sedan roll up the driveway, too polished, too out of place to belong. The tires crunched on gravel like it meant something. The door opened, and out stepped Jerry Langston, tie still too tight, smile still too fake. "Noah," he called, walking toward him like they were old friends. "Got a minute?" Noah didn't reply at first. He set down the axe, wiped his hands on his jeans, and met him halfway. Jerry's eyes scanned the property like he was already measuring it for resale. "We sent 2 notices," Jerry said, adjusting his tie. "I figured I'd come in person this time." Noah kept his jaw tight. "What's the number?" 17,000, give or take, plus late fees." Jerry pulled a folded paper from his coat. "You've got about 2 weeks, maybe a little less, depending on what the board says." Behind them, the screen door creaked. Claire had stepped out, coffee in hand, her expression unreadable. She didn't come closer, just stood there, watching. Noah didn't turn around. "I told you last time," he said quietly. "I'm doing what I can. The harvest's late. I've got some equipment to sell." Jerry shrugged. "I know, Noah, but policy's policy. If it were up to me—" "It's not." "No, it's not," Jerry said, and for a second he almost looked regretful. "I'm sorry." Noah took the paper without looking at it. Jerry patted his arm, turned, and left as quickly as he came. The car disappeared down the lane like a ghost that only stopped to collect bad news. Claire hadn't moved. When Noah finally turned toward her, she didn't speak, just sipped her coffee slowly, her eyes on him. Not with pity, but something else, like she was weighing a choice she didn't want to make. He nodded once and walked past her, heading back toward the barn, paper clenched in his hand. She didn't follow. She didn't offer a word. And yet, in that silence, everything shifted. The morning passed without her. Claire had gone somewhere. She didn't say where, and Noah didn't ask. The silence between them had thickened since the banker's visit, like a fog that wouldn't lift. He told himself it was better this way, cleaner, less complicated. The last thing he needed was to owe anyone more than he already did. He busied himself with repairs, fixed the squeaky porch step, tightened the hinges on the chicken coop door, pretended he didn't keep glancing down the road, half expecting to see that rental truck roll back in. By afternoon, the sun had warmed the kitchen windows, and the air inside hung still. Noah walked in for a drink and found himself at the sink, hands resting on the edge of the counter, head bowed. He wasn't sure what made him open the drawer. Maybe it stuck. Maybe it called to him. But when he tugged it open, nestled between a faded notepad and some old batteries, was an envelope. His name was written on the front in looping script, Noah. He stood there for a long second, just holding it. Then he tore it open and unfolded the letter inside. This place taught me how to dream. I used to sit by that fence, watching your world move with a kind of rhythm I never knew. It wasn't the silence that stayed with me. It was the purpose. The way every motion had meaning, even when no one was watching. You didn't know it, but you gave me something as a child, a sense of peace, a picture of a life not built on noise or names. And now, I want to give something back, not because I pity you, not because I think you need saving, but because this land matters, and so do you. No strings, no debts, just a chance to keep what was always yours. Claire. Noah stood still, heart thudding like distant thunder. He read it twice. Then again, the words didn't change, but something in him did. He folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the drawer, hands trembling more than he'd like to admit. Outside, the fields swayed in the breeze, unaware. Inside, the weight of pride and gratitude pressed against each other, and for the first time in a long while, Noah didn't know which would win. It started small, a whisper in the aisle of the feed store, a glance too long at the diner. Then came the name, half-spoken, half-confirmed, Claire Whitmore. Noah heard it first from Earl Jenkins, who always talked too loud and too soon. "You know that woman you've had hanging around the farm?" he'd said, his tone dipped in curiosity and caution. "Someone said she's that Claire Whitmore. You know, the Whitmore hotels, the oceanfront resorts, the penthouse tower in Chicago." Noah froze mid-step, sack of seed over his shoulder. "What are you talking about?" Earl pulled out his phone, an ancient flip model with a screen scratched to fog, but somehow it still managed to load a photo. There she was, Claire, sleek black dress, press conference backdrop. That same calm poise, but surrounded by lights, by suits, by power. Noah didn't say anything. He just finished his order and walked out without a word. By afternoon, it had spread. Someone recognized her from a magazine cover in the barber shop. Someone else swore their cousin catered a wedding Claire attended last spring. And just like that, the quiet guest on the porch became a spectacle. Judy at the diner asked him flat out, wiping her hands on a dish towel, "So what's it like having royalty out there on the farm?" Noah's reply was short. "She's just a person." But he couldn't shake it. Not the headlines, not the images of Claire dressed in designer gowns, shaking hands with politicians, speaking at charity galas. When he got home, the truck barely in park, he found her out by the field, hands buried in the dirt, pulling weeds like she didn't have a legacy bigger than most counties. She looked up at him, eyes steady, like she already knew. "So," she said simply, "they know." He nodded. "You could have told me." Claire stood, brushing her hands off on her jeans. "Would it have changed how you saw me?" He hesitated. "I don't know." Her voice was quiet. "That's why I didn't." The wind picked up, brushing the wheat around them in waves. For the first time, the distance between who she was and who she'd let him see felt real. And Noah, heart heavy, wasn't sure which version he'd been falling for. The evening sky burned low, all oranges and rust, as Noah walked the fence line with a storm in his chest. Claire was in the field again, her silhouette bent at the waist, running her fingers through the wheat like it was something sacred. From a distance, she looked like she belonged to the land, but up close, all he could see now were the headlines: "Heiress found living in small town. Whitmore fortune in flannel." He didn't stop at the edge this time. He stepped right into the field, boots crunching dry stalks, heart pounding harder than he wanted it to. "You should have told me," he said. Claire looked up slowly. The wind played with her braid, loose strands catching the last light. "I know." "No, I don't think you do," he said, voice low but hard. "This isn't some quiet retreat for you. This is my life. And you walked into it pretending to be someone you're not." Her eyes didn't flinch. I didn't pretend. I just didn't offer the version of me the world already thinks it knows. He crossed his arms, jaw tight. You let me think you were just Claire. I am just Claire, she said, stepping closer. I didn't come here to be Whitmore. I didn't come here to be photographed or praised or asked for anything. I came because this place, you, were the only part of my past that ever felt real. He searched her face, trying to separate the girl in the field from the woman in the glossy photos. You sat on my porch, ate dinner with my daughter. You looked me in the eye every day. And not once did I lie, she said quietly. Not once. He wanted to stay angry, wanted to wrap himself in it like armor, but her voice, steady, rooted, not begging, cut right through. I didn't come here as her, she said again. I came as the girl who used to sit by the fence and watch the only honest thing she'd ever seen. Noah looked away, out across the field that had once been his whole world, and for the first time it felt like someone else had known its worth long before he ever did. The next morning brought a silence thicker than usual. Not the soft kind, but the kind that hangs heavy in the air when something's been said and can't be taken back. Noah busied himself in the barn, sleeves rolled, grease on his knuckles, half cursing the old Massey Ferguson that hadn't started right since last spring. He didn't expect company. He certainly didn't expect her. But there she was, Claire, walking in without a word, hair tied up, jeans dusty and hands already tugging on a pair of 2 big work gloves she must have found by the porch. Noah didn't stop her, didn't ask why she was there. She stood beside the tractor like she belonged next to it, one hand on her hip. What's wrong with it? He raised a brow. Belt keeps slipping, needs tensioning, probably needs replacing, but I'm trying to get another month out of it. Claire stepped around to the other side of the engine, crouched down, and peered at the belt. V-belt looks frayed near the crank pulley, could reroute with a bypass, just to get it running. Noah blinked. You know engines? She smirked, pulling the glove tighter. Spent a few summers in the service bay of a Whitmore Motors dealership. My father thought I should learn the business from the ground up. I don't think he realized I'd fall in love with the smell of diesel. Together they worked in quiet rhythm. She handed him wrenches before he asked, braced the pulley while he adjusted the belt. Her hair stuck to her temple in the heat, and dirt smudged across her cheek when she wiped her brow with the back of her glove. But she didn't complain. She just kept working. Try it now, she said, stepping back. Noah turned the key. The engine grumbled, then roared to life. He shut it off, looked at her, and couldn't help but smile, just a little. You're not what I expected, he said. Claire shrugged. Neither are you. In that moment, she wasn't a billionaire. She wasn't a headline. She was just a woman with grease on her hands and a quiet fire in her eyes. And for the first time in days, Noah felt something he hadn't let himself feel in a long while. Hope. The town had always been slow to talk, but quick to remember. And now, with the truth of Claire's last name echoing through diners, barbershops, and feed store counters, the old stories began to stir. Not the glossy ones from magazine covers or investor meetings, but the ones that lived in memory, quieter, rooted in years when no one was paying attention. At the post office, old Mrs. Gable squinted over her glasses and said, "That little girl used to sit on Margaret Hollis's porch every summer with a glass of sweet tea and a book she never read, always watching the wheat fields, always barefoot." Judy from the diner recalled a different memory, pouring coffee for a customer who didn't ask for it. She cried once when the harvest failed. I remember. Her aunt brought her in for pie, and she asked me why the land looked sad, said it hurt to look at. I didn't know what to tell her. At the grain store, Earl claimed he'd seen her sneaking into the barn behind the Hollis place when she was maybe 9 or 10. Used to crawl up into the hayloft and just sit there, quiet as anything, like she was hiding from the whole world. And at the church, Pastor Reynolds dusted off an old memory during Sunday announcements. She once asked if God could love someone who felt invisible, said she didn't know where she fit. I remember because I didn't know what to say back then. I wish I did now. The story spread, not with gossip's bite, but with something gentler. Recognition. As if the town, once suspicious, now realized she hadn't just returned. She'd always been here in some way, watching, wondering, belonging in ways no one had seen until now. Noah heard them all. He didn't ask for the stories, but they found him anyway, slipped into his ears like wind through the screen door. And each one chipped away at the doubt he'd been gripping like a shield. Because maybe Claire hadn't just come back. Maybe she'd never truly left. The notice came like a slap in the middle of a good morning. Noah had just finished spreading fresh hay and was walking back to the house when he saw the paper nailed to the fence post near the road. White sheet, black ink, too official to be anything else. He didn't have to read it to know, but he did anyway. Foreclosure pending. Property to be auctioned by county order within 15 days. Noah stood still for a long moment, the sun climbing behind him like it had no idea the sky had just dropped. He'd been holding the numbers together with duct tape and grit, hoping for one more harvest, one more month, one more miracle. This paper said the waiting was over. He didn't speak to Claire that day. She saw the notice too, saw him tear it down, fold it twice, and walk back inside without a word. Her eyes followed him, but she didn't ask. Not then. That night, he sat alone in the barn, turning the folded notice in his hands like it might rewrite itself. He thought of Maddie, asleep upstairs, thought of his father, his grandfather, men who never once lost the land, and now it might end with him. But 2 days later, something changed. He drove into town to speak with the clerk, resignation heavy in his chest. He expected paperwork, expected cold sympathy and calculations. Instead, the woman behind the desk blinked at her screen, then looked up at him with a confused smile. "Your debt's been settled, Mr. Blake, paid in full, and the lien has been transferred back to your name." He stared at her. "What?" "It cleared yesterday afternoon," she said. "Private party. No public auction needed." Noah walked out in a daze, the paper in his hand now saying something else entirely. It didn't take long to figure it out. Claire was in the garden when he got home, kneeling in the dirt, planting tomatoes like she hadn't just saved the only thing he'd ever called his own. She didn't look up when he approached. And he didn't say thank you, not yet, because the words were too small for what she'd done, and too tangled in everything he still didn't understand. The house was quieter than usual that morning. Too quiet. No soft footsteps creaking across the porch, no coffee brewing in the kitchen, no Claire humming under her breath while washing out the mugs she insisted on drying by hand, just the ticking of the old wall clock, and the sound of Maddie's cereal spoon clinking against her bowl. Noah noticed first, by the empty chair on the porch, by the coat missing from the hook, by the boots no longer by the door. He checked the spare room. The bed was made, perfectly. Too perfectly. Her bag was gone. So was the folded flannel shirt he'd lent her, the one that never made it back to the hall closet. He stood there for a long time, hand resting on the doorframe, trying to summon anger, or confusion, or anything that didn't feel like loss. But all that came was a hollow ache he couldn't name. She hadn't left a note. No explanation, no message, just absence. When Maddie came down the stairs, rubbing sleep from her eyes, she looked past him to the porch. Is Claire feeding the chickens? Noah hesitated. No, sweetheart, she left early. Maddie's brow furrowed. Without saying goodbye? He nodded slowly. Yeah. She didn't speak again, just finished her cereal in silence, swinging her legs under the table. But after breakfast, she drifted to the front steps and sat there for an hour, chin resting on her knees, eyes locked on the dusty road as if waiting for a familiar truck to crest the hill. Noah watched her from the window, heart heavy. Maybe it was for the best, he told himself. Maybe Claire had come, done what she needed to do, and moved on. Back to the city, back to glass towers and spotless boardrooms where the dirt under your fingernails was metaphor, not reality. But still, he couldn't help glancing at the road too. Just once, just in case. Because even when someone leaves without a goodbye, part of you listens for the sound of them coming back. Noah didn't plan on watching it. He wasn't even sure how he ended up in front of the small TV in the corner of the living room, the one with rabbit ear antennas and a fuzzy picture, unless you hit the side just right. Maddie had heard about it from her teacher. Your friend Claire is going to be on the news tonight, and insisted they watch. So now they sat side by side on the couch, a half-eaten plate of grilled cheese between them, waiting for a woman Noah hadn't seen since the morning she disappeared without a word. The segment opened with drone shots of glittering skyscrapers and luxurious hotel lobbies, Whitmore properties across the globe. Then it cut to her, Claire. Hair swept back, blazer sharp, posture perfect. But something was different, something quieter. Her eyes weren't on the camera the way he remembered them being on him. They weren't trying to convince anyone. They just looked tired, clear. The interviewer leaned in, all practiced charm. After leading Whitmore Global through 5 years of growth, you're stepping away. Why now? Claire smiled, but it was small, thoughtful. Because I spent so many years building things that looked perfect from the outside. Towers, brands, stories, and one day I woke up and realized none of it felt like home. The interviewer nodded politely. So what are you building now? Claire looked down for a second. When she looked back up, there was a softness in her expression that hadn't been there before. I want to rebuild something worth remembering, something rooted, something real. Noah felt Maddie glance up at him. She means you, she whispered. He didn't answer. Claire went on talking about sustainability initiatives and rural investment funds, about leaving cities behind and rediscovering the meaning of hard work. She didn't mention a town or a farm or a man with a shovel and too much pride. But she didn't have to, because when the interviewer asked her if she missed the city lights, Claire just smiled, turned her gaze off camera, and said, "Not even a little." And in that look, soft, distant, full of something only they would understand, Noah saw everything she hadn't said. It was one of those late spring mornings where the dew clung stubbornly to everything, and the sky was caught somewhere between gray and gold. Noah moved through his chores on autopilot, feeding the hens, checking the water trough, tightening the gate latch that always leaned a little left. The world had settled into a quieter rhythm since Claire left, familiar, maybe even easier, but emptier in ways he didn't have the language for. He didn't check the mailbox most days. There hadn't been anything worth opening in weeks. But today, something pulled him toward it as he crossed the yard, a coffee mug in one hand, the other brushing against the weathered post as he opened the rusted flap. Inside sat a single envelope, no return address, just his name, handwritten in a script he recognized immediately. He stared at it for a long moment, then tucked the coffee cup under his arm and opened the envelope with careful fingers. Inside was a deed, his land, his name, and hers, crossed out in pen with a clean line, as if to say this was never mine to keep. Attached to the front was a bright yellow sticky note, the kind you'd find in an office downtown, not on a farm fence post. The handwriting was unmistakable. Don't you dare call it charity, it's legacy. C. Noah stood there in the driveway, wind brushing the paper against his thumb, the rest of the world fading to silence. His breath caught in his chest, not from the shock, not even from the weight of the gesture, but from the way she still knew exactly what would make his pride bristle. But it didn't. Not this time. Because somehow, in the quiet of her absence, she had found a way to say what she couldn't with words. I believe in this land, and I believe in you. He folded the papers slowly, cradling them like something alive. Then he looked out across the field, his field, and whispered the only thing he could manage. Thank you. The old oak tree had stood at the edge of the field for as long as Noah could remember, its limbs wide and reaching, its bark thick with age and memory. It was where Claire used to sit that first morning, quiet and still, like the land had called her back from wherever she'd run. Noah never forgot that image, her silhouette framed against dawn, the fence at her back, the horizon ahead. So when the field thawed and the soil softened, he brought out the wood, not the new kind from the hardware store. The old stuff, seasoned and storied, pulled from the barn rafters and sanded down with care. He cut each plank by hand, measuring more by instinct than tape, and shaped them into something simple, solid, something that felt like her. Mattie helped. She insisted. When the frame was complete and the legs were anchored deep into the ground beneath the oak's sprawling shade, she asked for paint, bright colors, not the muted browns and grays her father usually favored. "I want it to look like it's blooming," she said, eyes shining. And so she did. Tiny wildflowers stretched across the bench in every shade of summer, daisies, clover, bluebells, some real, some imagined. On the top slat, she painted a single sunflower with a sky behind it, then signed her name in the corner like it was a masterpiece. When it was done, they stood back together, hands on hips, cheeks smudged with paint. "She'd like it," Mattie said. Noah nodded. Yeah, she would. After that, they began to sit there, not every day, but often enough. Sometimes in the morning, with a thermos of coffee, sometimes at dusk, watching the wind ripple through the wheat like an unseen hand. Noah never said it aloud, but every time his boots crunched across that patch of earth, his heart whispered the same quiet hope, that maybe, someday, she'd come back. And when she did, she'd find something waiting, not just a bench, but a place that said, "We remembered." The wheat was tall again, taller than it had any right to be, considering how close they'd come to losing it all. The land had healed little by little, with Noah's hands in the soil and Mattie's laughter echoing through the fields. Life hadn't become easier, but it had found its rhythm, the kind that doesn't ask for more, just asks you to keep showing up. It was late afternoon when the white pickup rolled up the drive. Not a luxury car, not tinted windows or sleek chrome trim, just a dusty old truck, quiet engine, and tires that moved like they belonged on this road. Noah looked up from where he was mending the gate and froze. Claire stepped out slowly, jeans and boots, a flannel shirt rolled at the sleeves, no makeup, no suitcase, no entourage, just her. Hair in a loose braid, face sun-touched, expression unreadable, and yet somehow softer than he remembered. He didn't move at first, just let the moment stretch between them like the silence of the first time she sat in his field. Claire met his eyes, then took one slow step forward. "No press conference?" he asked, voice dry, almost teasing. She gave a breath of a smile. "I left the cameras behind." He nodded once, still unsure if this was real. "You come to visit, or—" "I came to stay," she said simply. "If that's still an option." He should have said something, should have asked why now, what changed, what made her turn the truck around after all this time, but instead he just stepped aside and motioned toward the house. "I think we still have your mug," he said. Claire smiled wider this time, eyes glinting. As she walked beside him toward the porch, Mattie appeared at the window, face pressed against the glass. She let out a shout that sent the screen door flying open, arms flinging around Claire before either of them could say a word. Claire hugged her tight, voice barely a whisper. "I missed you too." Noah stood a few feet away, watching, not sure if this was a new beginning or a continuation of something they never got to finish. Either way, she was here, and this time he wasn't letting her disappear. Spring came late that year, but when it did, it painted the fields with promise. The frost lifted slowly, the soil thawed, and the air carried that first scent of new beginnings, damp earth, blooming clover, and something unspoken in the space between two people working side by side. Claire was different now, but not in the ways Noah had expected. She moved through the fields with quiet familiarity, pulling weeds with gloved hands, tucking stray strands of hair behind her ear, wiping sweat from her brow without flinching. No complaints, no distance. She belonged, and the land didn't argue. They worked mostly in silence, the kind that only comes when two people no longer need to fill space with words. Noah guided her through the rows, showing her how to check for early sprouts, how to walk between the furrows without disturbing the seedlings. She followed closely, watching, learning, growing roots of her own. At one point, their hands reached for the same burlap sack of seed. His fingers brushed against hers, just a passing touch, but she didn't move, didn't pull away. Just looked up at him with eyes that didn't ask for permission and didn't offer apologies. Noah's breath caught. The sun sat low behind her, casting her in gold, and he suddenly wasn't sure if time had paused or if his heart just had. She smiled, soft and knowing, then went back to work like nothing had happened. But everything had. That evening they sat on the porch steps, boots muddy, hands dirt-streaked, watching the last light fall over the field they had planted together. Maddie ran barefoot in the grass, chasing the dog through dandelions. Claire leaned her shoulder gently against Noah's. He didn't speak, didn't shift away. Because some moments don't ask to be defined, they just ask to be felt. And for once, Noah let himself feel it. Not fear, not doubt, just the quiet certainty that she was here, not passing through, not escaping, but staying. And maybe, just maybe, this season would finally grow something that lasted. It was a Saturday with nothing urgent on the list. No fence to patch, no storm on the horizon, just the kind of stillness that invited something unexpected. Claire had mentioned it once, months ago, in a quiet moment between pulling weeds and folding laundry. I never went to the fairgrounds when I was a kid. Aunt Margaret said it was too loud, too crowded. I used to watch the lights from her window and wonder what it felt like to be up there, to float. Noah remembered. So when he tapped her shoulder that morning and held up 2 folded tickets, Claire blinked at him, confused. "You're serious?" He gave her that slow, stubborn half grin. "We're taking the trip you never took." They left Maddie with Judy from the diner, who all but shoved them out the door with a wink and a basket of peanut brittle. The drive to the fairgrounds was quiet, but the good kind. Claire leaned her arm out the window, fingers tracing the breeze, her hair catching sunlight like wild honey. The fair was already in motion by the time they arrived, cotton candy machines humming, kids squealing on rickety rides, music spilling from rusted speakers. Claire looked around like someone walking through a dream she'd only ever imagined. They wandered past the pie contest, the petting zoos, the smell of funnel cakes wafting through the air. But Noah had one thing in mind, the Ferris wheel. It creaked and groaned like it had something to say, towering above everything with chipped paint and glowing bulbs. Claire hesitated as they stepped up to the gate, one hand resting on Noah's arm. "I've never done this," she said. He looked at her. "Then let's do it right." They boarded the car, and it lifted slowly, rocking gently as it climbed. Claire's hand found his without thinking. She didn't let go. At the top, the town stretched out below them, wheat fields glowing like old gold, barns scattered like storybook pieces. Claire turned to him, eyes wide with wonder, the wind catching her breath. "This," she whispered, "was worth the wait." And Noah, still holding her hand, realized they weren't floating above the town. They were finally grounded, together. The announcement came on a Monday, quiet, unceremonious, taped to the bulletin board outside the town hall between notices for lost pets and bake sales. A new education center was being built on the edge of town, where the old grain depot once stood before it collapsed in a windstorm 5 years back. No one expected it. No one knew who was behind it. But the flyer said one thing clearly: Hollis Learning Center, opening fall. At first, people speculated. Some guessed a government grant. Others assumed it was a last-ditch attempt by the school board to keep kids from leaving town. But Noah knew better. He found Claire out by the garden, kneeling beside the tomato plants, dirt on her knees and hair tucked under an old ball cap. She looked up as he approached, that quiet look of hers, already knowing what he'd come to ask. "You didn't tell me," he said. She shrugged, wiping her hands on a cloth. "Didn't need to." "Hollis?" he asked, voice softer now. Claire nodded. "She gave me my start, not with money but with safety. She was the first person who ever saw me as a child, not a name. I wanted the next generation to have a space that felt the same." Noah crouched beside her, plucking a weed from the edge of the garden bed. "You could have put your name on it." Claire smiled faintly. "It's not my story. Not really. It's theirs." Word spread fast. The town buzzed with curiosity, and slowly, gratitude followed. Parents who had thought of moving whispered about staying. Retired teachers offered to volunteer. Teenagers who'd once felt invisible started asking questions about mentorships, scholarships, futures. And still, Claire never stood in front of a microphone, never cut a ribbon or posed for pictures. She just showed up at the site one morning with her sleeves rolled and helped unload a truck of donated books, as if she were any other volunteer who believed in the soil beneath their feet. But Noah watched her from a distance and knew. This wasn't just generosity, it was legacy, quiet, rooted, real, just like her. The rain came fast, one of those summer storms that rolls in without warning, all thunderless clouds and sudden wind. Noah had seen it before, felt the shift in the air, but this time he didn't rush. He and Claire had been out by the barn, checking the fence line, when the first drops began to fall, light at first, then heavier, then all at once. They sprinted toward the barn, laughing, soaked through in seconds. Claire's braid clung to her back, her flannel shirt plastered to her arms. Noah threw open the side door and they ducked inside, boots thudding on the wood as rain hammered the tin roof above them. Breathless and dripping, they stood side by side in the wide open space, the scent of hay and earth curling around them. Water dripped from Noah's brow. Claire pushed her wet hair from her face, cheeks flushed, eyes sparkling like stormlight. He turned to her, lips parted as if to speak, but the words caught somewhere between his throat and his chest. She looked at him, that way she always did, like he wasn't just someone she cared for, but someone she'd been waiting for. The silence swelled, soft and electric, louder than the rain. Noah took a step closer, just one. Claire didn't move back. He reached up, gently brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. Her breath hitched. "No more running," he said, barely above a whisper. She nodded. "No more hiding." And then, finally, he kissed her. Not cautious, not questioning, just full, steady, and certain. Like the moment had always been waiting there between them, growing with every fence mended, every seed planted, every late night on the porch, and early morning in the fields. Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside the barn, time slowed. When they pulled apart, Claire rested her forehead against his, eyes closed, hands still on his chest. Neither spoke. Because some truths don't need language. They only need the rain, a roof, and the courage to stop holding back. The day the sign went up, the sky was wide and cloudless. The kind of blue that only seemed to show up after a storm had finally passed. For good. Noah stood on the porch steps, sanding the edges of the wooden plank with steady strokes, his hands stained with sawdust and linseed oil. It had taken weeks to finish, not because the carving was complicated, but because the meaning behind it was. Claire had seen it once in his sketchbook, just a rough idea, a quiet dream. She never asked about it, never pushed. But the next morning she'd left a small set of chisels beside his coffee cup with a note that simply read, "You carve it, I'll hang it." So he did. The final letters were etched by hand. No templates, no machines. Just the rhythm of a steady blade, shaping words that felt truer than any he'd ever said aloud. Blake and Whitmore Farmstead, rooted in history, grown with hope. Claire helped hang it, standing on the porch rail with one foot braced on the column, while Noah steadied the ladder. She held the drill like she'd been doing it all her life. When they stepped back to look at it, the sun hit the carved wood just right, casting soft shadows across each letter. Maddie came running out a few minutes later, dragging her backpack and a peanut butter sandwich, and stopped dead in her tracks when she saw it. "Does that mean she lives here now?" she asked, squinting up at the sign. Claire crouched down and tapped the center of Maddie's chest. "I think I always did." Noah didn't say much. He just wrapped one arm around Claire's shoulders and pulled her close, the porch creaking beneath their boots, the scent of fresh-cut hay floating in from the fields. People would drive past that sign. Some would nod, some might smile, some might wonder. But for Noah and Claire, it was more than a name. It was a beginning, built not on money or titles, but on dirt, work, forgiveness, and the kind of love that takes root when no one's watching. And this time, they were both staying. The sun had just dipped below the hills, casting a golden haze over the fields as fireflies began blinking along the fence line. The porch light glowed softly, and the air smelled like wood smoke and blooming clover. Dinner was long done, Maddie asleep upstairs with her window cracked open to catch the breeze. Noah sat on the steps, elbows on his knees, watching the twilight settle over his land like a blanket. Claire came out quietly, barefoot, holding something in her hands. It was a small wooden box, dirt-smudged and worn at the edges, the kind of box that looked like it had lived in someone's drawer for too long, carrying things they couldn't quite throw away. She didn't say anything at first, just sat beside him, placing the box between them. Her knees touched his. Her silence said more than most people's speeches. Noah glanced at the box, then at her. "What's that?" Claire exhaled, slow and steady. "Something I've had since I was a teenager. Used to keep it under my bed." He looked closer now, curious. "What's in it?" She opened the lid with quiet fingers. Inside were a few folded scraps of paper, a dried four-leaf clover, and a faded photo. 2 fields, 1 fence, and a figure in the distance walking behind a plow. "You?" she said, tapping the photo gently. "I took this with a disposable camera when I was 15. Never told anyone." Noah blinked, emotion catching somewhere in his chest. Claire closed the box, her hands lingering on the lid. Then she looked up at him, eyes steady in the soft porch light. "If I asked you to build a life with me, starting right here, would you?" He didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. Instead, he reached over, took the box from her hands, and set it carefully on the step between them. Then he turned to her, took her face in his calloused palms, and kissed her with all the weight of a yes that didn't need words. When they finally pulled apart, he whispered, "We've already started." The fields had never looked so full. Golden wheat danced in the late summer wind, swaying in gentle waves beneath a sky so blue it felt like a blessing. Laughter rang out across the open land, children running barefoot through rows of sunflowers, chasing one another with the joy only youth knows. A picnic blanket fluttered nearby, a spilled basket of peaches and half-eaten sandwiches scattered across it like confetti. Noah and Claire sat together on the bench beneath the old oak tree, the one Maddie had once painted with wild flowers, now faded from sun and seasons, but no less beautiful. His hand was wrapped around hers, fingers laced together like they belonged that way. Her head rested gently on his shoulder, and the years had softened them both, creased their faces, streaked their hair, but never dulled the way they looked at each other. He watched the children play, Maddie among them now, older, steadier, her arms around 2 little ones, who called her Auntie. The wind carried their voices, and it carried something else too, peace. The kind you only find when the world has stopped asking for more. Claire leaned forward slightly, her gaze sweeping the field, and her voice came so soft it felt like a secret. "I used to watch you from here," she whispered. Noah turned just a little. "From this spot?" She smiled, eyes glistening. Every summer, sitting on that fence post, legs swinging, wondering what it would feel like to be a part of it all, to belong to something real. He squeezed her hand. "You belong here more than anyone." Claire looked out again, taking it all in, the land, the children, the warmth of the air, and the hum of a life no longer imagined. And then, quieter still, she said, "But now I get to live it." The oak leaves rustled overhead, whispering their approval. And in that moment, with the past behind them and everything they'd built stretched out before them, they sat hand in hand beneath the tree where it all began, not two strangers in a field, but a story that finally came home.